Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Homies, home girls, home boys, home trans, all the home workers out there. Welcome back to another show of the Work From Home Show. I'm your host, Naresh Vissa, with Adam Schrader, as usual. And we have, I think, someone who's definitely going to be my favorite guest. Could be the best guest that we have on the show.
I don't know about that.
He's someone
setting the bar real low there. Setting the bar real low for you.
Well,
yeah, I got to reset expectations.
Well, here's why. This guest, he and I go way back. 2008 is the first time I reached out to him. It was actually his publicist when he was with TheStreet.com, and we booked him on several shows when I was an intern working for Adam, the co-host of this show. Yes, I was Adam's intern, and I booked James on a radio station, used to be called the Biz Radio Network, hosts Dan Frischberg and Jack Workenthien. James came on multiple shows for that
I remember
radio network. And the first time I got James on the show, it was not only was it the highest rated show that we had, but he came back as a repeat guest, and we would tee our audience up and tell them, James Altucher from TheStreet.com and Stock Picker. You ran a company called Stock Picker at the time.
Yeah.
And people would just call in. We had calls going crazy, just calling in with their stocks. Like, hey, what do you think of Procter & Gamble? What do you think of this small cap stock that no one's ever heard of? And you were just like, it was like a lightning round. Like, boom, this is going to go up. This is good management team, bad management team, stay away. And
well,
James,
I just want to say at the time I worked with very closely with Jim Cramer. In fact, I was writing in part on Mad Money, and for the show, I was giving him ideas every now and then, and we'd talk on the weekends and get ideas, and so I did actually kind of have experience. I had lightning round experience.
Yeah. Well,
were you pushing the button when they were asking questions, making
No.
the sound effects?
No, I wish I could have done that. That would have been fun.
Yeah, well, James, the guest is James Altucher. He and I have known each other for probably 12 years now. I've booked him on so many different episodes, podcasts, radio shows. And back when I talked about how I got my online and digital marketing career started, it was at Stansberry Research. So back when I was at Stansberry, I saw that James, you and Porter Stansberry had a kind of mellow debate on Yahoo Finance. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And I was like, we got to get James. So I helped create the Stansberry Radio Network. And in fact, that was what I was hired to do. And I said, we got to get James back to have a real debate with Porter Stansberry. And so we ended up recruiting you to join the company and start your own podcast. And now your podcast has, my guess is like millions of downloads and listens every month. You have your own newsletter, multiple newsletters through, I think, Agora Financial or Agora Publishing. Your podcast, I think you might even have multiple podcasts now. So you're now you're the one and only James Altucher. Welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Well, thank you so much, Naresh, and thanks for always being there at every step of my career. So you've been behind the scenes.
Yeah, I remember you would be G-chatting me during some of your low points, and we'll talk about your blog a little later where you talk about your low points. But for those who don't know James Altucher, he's a host of the James Altucher Show, a former hedge fund manager, probably a current manager, venture capitalist. He's an entrepreneur who's founded more than 20 different companies. He's the editor of the Altucher Secret Income, Altucher Top 1% Advisory, a bunch of other newsletters that are available at chooseyourselffinancial.com. And I'm going to share, he's a prolific writer. He's had like at least 10, maybe 15 number one best-selling books on Amazon, multiple New York Times best-selling books. My favorite ones, the ones that we're going to talk about today, are Choose Yourself, Be Happy, Make Millions, Live the Dream. That book, I'll tell you, this podcast would not be around if it weren't for Choose Yourself. My company, Christian Media and Marketing, wouldn't be around if it weren't for Choose Yourself. Incredible, incredible book. His other books, The Choose Yourself Guide to Wealth, The Choose Yourself Stories, and The Power of No. I liked this book a lot too because it's very important to say no. The Power of No,
yes,
because one little word can bring health, abundance, and happiness. Reinvent Yourself, which I felt like I did multiple times, and I think many of our listeners are having to do that during this recession, depression, whatever you want to call it. The Rich Employee. It's not all about, that's another of his books. It's not all about starting a business. You can be a very happy employee and become a very rich, wealthy employee. And that book talks about that. And then three of my favorite like short ebooks that you wrote called How to Be the Luckiest Person Alive, I Was Blind, But Now I See, and 40 Alternatives to College. So he's the author of all these books. Again, James Altucher, it's truly a pleasure for you to come on the show.
Well, you guys, thanks for having me. This is such a pleasure for me, so I'm really glad. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I want to start this discussion by talking about a recession that happened 20 years ago. That was the dot-com bust. And you, at the time, I believe, were working full-time at HBO, and you started your first company, which you ended up selling for millions of dollars. Tell us how you started that company and how you did it while you were working full-time at HBO.
Sure. So it's interesting because a lot of people say, well, isn't it risky to be an entrepreneur? And people say things like 9 out of 10 businesses fail. And, you must be a risk taker because you're an entrepreneur. It's like gambling. And the truth is actually the opposite. Like a successful entrepreneur actually takes less risk than other people. Like the key to success in entrepreneurship is to remove as much risk as possible. And that's often the difference. I mean, there's a lot of subtleties and nuances between what makes a successful entrepreneur and what doesn't. But the key thing is reducing risk as much as possible. And so, back in 1995, I was working at HBO. I was a lowly junior programmer analyst was my title. I was making $40,000 a year, which was, and I was 26 years old. Yeah, 26 years old, 27 years old. And I was like rich, making $40,000 a year. This was amazing for me. And in New York City, by the way, I couldn't live in Manhattan because on that salary, the cheapest apartment in New York City, even then, like a studio would be, I don't know, like $1,200 a month. And that was like, if you wanted to live just with rats and cockroaches. And so here I was commuting from my parents' home. I had this job. I was horrible at it. I wasn't really that good at it. And then and HBO really did not want me to HBO really did not want me to work on internet stuff. They were trying to build interactive TV through the cable lines, and they were really scared of the internet. But I finally convinced them, you guys should get HBO.com at the very least. They didn't own HBO.com. Another company that was called HBO and Company, was a medical supplies company, owned that URL. So HBO took my advice, this little guy, me, and they bought that URL in 1995 for $250,000 back then. And so then now they needed to build a website. So hold that thought for a second. In parallel, my brother-in-law was in the CD-ROM business, which for all those Gen Zers out there, CD-ROMs were like a I don't even know how to describe it, actually. It was like something you put in your computer and it would have games on it and so on. So he would make these CD-ROMs, and he was, of course, going out of business because it doesn't exist anymore. And my sister said, can you help him out? And I didn't really want to. My goal at HBO was to make a TV show. I was not an entrepreneur, or at least I didn't think I was. I really wanted to make a TV show, and I felt like this would get in my way. But I knew all about the internet. And there were only, at that time, this is 1995, there was only maybe 5 people in New York City who knew what the internet and the web was. And certainly nobody knew how to program on the internet except me and like these 5 other individuals. And I'm not exaggerating when I say there were only 5. And each one of us ended up starting a company, and I was the least successful of all 5. And I showed my brother-in-law how to design a website. He was a designer. And then HBO now so going back to HBO needed someone to make a website for them. So since I was the only one who knew the internet at this point, I kind of volunteered for the job, and I was the only one who knew. And they said, okay, but you can't make our website because you're just a lowly programmer. Outsource this to companies and get proposals and so on. So I got 5 proposals, and I told my brother-in-law, you submit a proposal also. And so he submitted. He's French, and French people can barely speak English, let alone write English. And so I had to write his proposal for him. So I got these 5 proposals plus my brother-in-law's proposal written by me, and I had to choose the best one. Of course, the one written by me was the best one.
Whoever wrote this was phenomenal. They knew what they were talking about.
Not only was he a genius, but he was the cheapest of all of them, of all the proposals. Imagine that. And so now this sounds a little unethical because it is, but I was 26 years old, 27 years old. And, I really felt like I had a vision. I loved HBO. Like I knew what I wanted the HBO website to look like. And I wanted to really design it, from top to bottom and program it and everything. I mean, when I took the job at HBO, I had 2 job offers: HBO for $40,000 a year and JP Morgan for $80,000 a year, for $82,000 a year.
Oh wow, that's where I used to work. That was my job offer out of undergrad also.
Well, mine was at a grad school, so you were a much better undergrad than me. And we could have been coworkers, but I chose HBO just because I loved watching HBO TV. So I just loved it. And so anyway, that's how we got our start. My brother-in-law and I did the HBO website. And then other companies would come to us and say, hey, we want a website just like that HBO one you did. And so we did AmericanExpress.com. We did Con Edison, which is a utility company in New York. We did websites for Warner Brothers, Sony, Universal, BMG. We did Interscope Records, Loud Records, Bad Boy Records.
You hit it big.
We were doing a lot of entertainment websites. We did The Matrix. We did the Scream movies, the websites for those. We did a lot of very famous movies now. And it was fun. It was exciting. And you always had this feeling that there were new things to learn. And again, there was only like 5 or 6 companies like us in the city. So we were a small community. We all knew each other. And then once companies started being bought, we all kind of bought each other. And so it was an interesting business. It was fun. The problem was a couple of interesting things. One is I don't think I learned anything doing this. And I think I don't think we were unique. So I think I tried a little harder to be unique, and I was a good salesperson, so that kind of helped me avoid being unique. Because and not that I had any natural talent at sales, I just had a big vision and belief about the internet. I was so excited about the internet. So, but nothing really separated me from the other competitors out there, like Razorfish. Some of these you might know, some not, but Razorfish was kind of the most popular one, and we were always competing against them. And, I guess I learned how to sell a company. I had never known that before. And that's a different skill than starting a company. And that was a very difficult skill to learn. But the other thing I learned just in terms of running a company is, again, I learned this idea about risk. Like, even though we were like American Express was our second client after HBO, and we charged them $250,000. And I was making $42,000 a year or $40,000 a year at my HBO job, and I did not quit my job because even though at the time it was only my brother-in-law and me, we built up, but at the time it was only the 2 of us. I didn't quit my job because I was so afraid of taking the risk of the company not working out and losing my job. I didn't quit my job for 18 months after I started my company. My company was called Reset. I did not quit my job for 18 months, a year and a half. I would work all day at HBO and then all night at Reset, which was just down the street. We had 20 employees then. We had built out a new space. We were going to have millions in revenues. And finally, I decided to quit my job and take the chance. And my parents were begging me not to, but I did it. And the other thing that was fun about this was at one point, I know I'm going a lot into this first story, but it was an exciting time. Like the internet was growing so quickly, and it was my first startup, and I was playing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Did I want to make TV shows? Did I want to be an entrepreneur? Would the internet be a creative medium and not just a commercial medium? So I walked to the office of the CEO of HBO, Jeff Bewkes. He ended up being the CEO of Time Warner until just very recently when Time Warner was acquired. And I said to him, he didn't know who I was. And on the way there, even, I ran into the a high-up executive of HBO, and she said to me, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to visit the CEO." And she said, "You can't do that." And everybody will always tell you, you can't do that. At the exact moment, you absolutely should do that. Like, they don't want you to do it, so that's why they say you can't do that. But you could do whatever you want, and that's what I learned there. But I went and visited Jeff Bewkes, the CEO of HBO, and I said, "Look, HBO does the best original TV shows. Let's do original web shows." So HBO let me do this original web show, which I did for 3 years on their website called 3 a.m. And every Tuesday night at 3 a.m, I would go out with a camera and I'd interview people at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night. And Saturday night, it's crowded at 3 a.m. Everyone's out. But Tuesday night, if you're out at like Adam or Naresh, if you're out at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night, probably something not very good is happening. Yeah. And I would go out and I would interview people and put the 4 best interviews each week for 2.5 years on the HBO website. And it was it was their most popular website of all their shows. And so that also got me a lot of business. And eventually I went, full entrepreneur all the time and proceeded to ruin my life. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I read your story about the show at 3 a.m. And when I was living in Baltimore, that's when I really read a lot of your works. When I lived there in Baltimore, I said, you know what, let me try that in Baltimore. That must be an interesting sight to see. So one night I couldn't sleep and I said,
and you got
just
killed.
Go out at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. And I came running back to my condo within 15 minutes.
Yeah. It's scary. Like the HBO used to require that I bring a security guard. And so one time we went to this place on 11th Avenue, which is all the way, if you knew New York City, it's all the way right by the river. It was disgusting then. And right by the Lincoln Tunnel. And it was where all the people from New Jersey would go before they would go home. And there were a lot of transvestite prostitutes that would hang out at this bar. And it was just... So I wore an undercover camera to interview people to kind of find out what was going on at this place. And the security guard saw me, and I mean for the bar, and he went chasing after me. And the security guard that HBO had hooked me up with, he was running even faster than me out of that place and down the street. He didn't stop for like 3 blocks. I had to catch up to him and say we're safe. So I stopped using a security guard after that.
Tell me, how did you make the shift from an employee to a business owner? Because that's a mind switch that people have to go through if they're going to do it. How did you go through that switch?
Yeah, it was a good question. And I guess I've never really thought about it because you would think I was already doing it. I was an entrepreneur, but like I said, it took me a while before I went full time, before I would even consider going full time, because I wasn't sure I wanted to do this. Like it's not really that fun often to be an entrepreneur. I really didn't enjoy it that much. And, I guess at some point I realized, this business is not going to grow unless I'm full time. Like my brother-in-law didn't speak English. The other employees and even the other clients didn't like him. And, so we were having a hard time growing. And I decided that, okay, I need to do this full time. And I made sure enough clients were in place that, I was good for at least a year, just in case we stopped getting clients. Like I was very paranoid about taking risk, and I still didn't enjoy it. And so I swore to myself, I was going to sell this business within 1 year. And 1 year to the day, I did in fact sell it. I think also I started to realize, what there was structurally problems I was having with being an employee. Like you weren't necessarily awarded on merit. I found out there was lots of things that went into calculating someone's salary. For instance, every year they would up the salaries of new employees. Like they would say within HR, if you hire a new employee, now here's their starting salary. So, but if I had started at a lower salary, I was still on that scale. So sometimes there were new employees with less experience who were hired that had a higher salary than me. Anyway, that's just a nuance. And also I realized how were they going to judge the metrics of success for the HBO website? And that was my job. So I didn't know how they were going to judge my success. You know, if you make a TV show, they judge on the success of the ratings. If you're in a business that makes toilets, they judge you on the success of how well the toilet sells. So it was unclear to me how my success was going to be judged and whether I was going to be able to rise up to this company in a position that I wanted. And of course, I wanted to be the top. And at the same time, I did like, you know, I was having a lot of interesting experiences running this company, and I wanted to sell it. And I realized there might be more money here than I thought. And I do have to say I made a lot of mistakes in terms of maximizing value. For one thing, my company was very profitable. And at that time, you wanted to be unprofitable in order to get the highest selling price for your company. And that was a mistake that, you know, was a harsh reality that I didn't realize until later. And I don't know if I ever really loved being an entrepreneur. I think I loved different ideas I had and I was excited, but it's very painful to be an entrepreneur. Like there's many stressful moments. There's many scary moments. There are entire years, even now, where I don't make any money and I wonder when's the next time I'm going to make money. And, you know, being an entrepreneur is, you know, looking at it a different way. It's really just one source of income. If you never sell the business, being an entrepreneur is just one source of income. And to really make money, you have to have many sources of income. And I had to kind of grapple with that a little bit and understand that. And then I got too obsessed with money. And of course, that whenever you get obsessed with money, you immediately lose it all. So I went broke after I made all this money. You know, I didn't know anything about business. And I start this business, sell it for millions. And then I just went dead broke. Like I went from I cashed out at the top. I had millions in my checking account. And then I remember one day in the fall of 2002, I looked at my bank account. I had $143 left out of millions. And I was so just depressed and suicidal. And I had 2 kids to feed. Like they were babies then. And just was really unpleasant. And that wasn't that wasn't the first time that happened. Like I've started and sold a couple of businesses since. And I just would always have this horrible tendency to think, oh my gosh, I sold another business. I finally defeated this demon. And as soon as I would think like that, I would go broke again. And I just kept going broke like I was a maniac. And yeah, so I don't know if I ever got the full mindset of an entrepreneur. I wish I could put the knowledge I have now back in myself from the 90s, because I would have done things a lot differently. I would have maximized value a lot differently. There's things I know about business and entrepreneurship now that I would never have guessed back then. And I wish someone like me would have told me back then.
Well, James, talking about just kind of the painful journey, I tell people, and I have a feeling you might have said this maybe on your podcast or you wrote about it, but I tell people, don't be an entrepreneur unless you're a masochist, because you're just constantly beating yourself up. You talk about lying on the floor, crying, looking up at the ceiling. I've been there, done that. It's if you're not able to handle that, then that's what I tell the younger folks, even people my age who are trying to get in. I say, don't become an entrepreneur, because if you don't have that type of thick skin, if you're not going to be able to handle that, then this is not for you.
That's so right. And even if you have the best business on the planet, okay, even if your idea is so good that you feel like nothing can go wrong, there's still going to be so many things that go wrong that it really challenges your ability. It challenges your psychological fortitude. It challenges your ability to be creative. It challenges your ability to not succumb to easy ways out, like selling the business for a cheap price. And I think I've always fell for that. Like, I don't know. There's one company, I guess I'm sort of a co-founder of. I was involved in the initial discussions. Now it's a very big, successful company, and I'm still a major shareholder of it. And this product, I can't even describe it because I don't want to say anything bad about the company because it's a great company and it literally saves lives. But this, like I said, this product saves lives. Like every day, the comments we get is, I just want you to know you saved another life today. And even this company, which we knew was a great product, we knew it would save lives. We knew customers would never have a problem with it and would always buy more. And the reality is when we first went to demos for sales, sometimes it just didn't work in a demo. It would work every other time. And, demo luck, it just wouldn't work in the demo. And then it would be back to the drawing board. We had an inventor who would tweak it and fix whatever problems until we're at the point we're at now. And, there's nothing you can do that to avoid having feelings of like, oh my God, I just invested all this time and money and now I'm just screwed forever. It's a very painful thing.
Whenever you left HBO, did you stay on running did your company continue running their website? Like one of the things we've talked to people about before is, your first client can be your current job. If you decide to go out and do what you're doing as a business. Did you stay on with HBO in that capacity?
Yeah, HBO became our biggest client actually after that. HBO loved me, and I had to be honest with them and say, look, this company I'm hiring is also me. Because at one point they wanted to buy the company, and so I had to say, okay, and they wanted to do due diligence on the founders, and I said, okay, well, you already know me, so I have to tell you this. And they were fine with it, but after a few weeks, they just said, it might be also best if you choose one or the other. And so this is another factor in me leaving. I chose the business. I didn't have to leave, but I think they were just uncomfortable with it. And but they stayed as the biggest client even after I left, even after we sold the business and after I left the business that acquired us, HBO was still the biggest client.
James, now kind of talking a little bit about the choose yourself concept. Again, your book, one of the most inspirational books I've ever read, changed my life. It's changed millions of people's lives around the world. It's called Choose Yourself, Be Happy, Make Millions, Live the Dream. Available on Amazon and every other bookstore out there. Your book, Choose Yourself, and the concept of Choose Yourself. Why do you think our listeners who are currently working from home, or they could be unemployed, maybe they got laid off or fired from their jobs recently, how can people choose themselves, and what does that mean?
Well, it's sort of like that story I said about how I was walking to the CEO's office, and the employee who stopped me actually was the head of marketing of HBO. And she's like, oh, James, where are you going? And, I said, I'm going to the CEO's office. I have an idea. And she was really emphatic. She's like, you can't do that. Like, you have to, the CEO was my boss's boss at the time. And she said, you got to go through your boss. And I'm like, why? I don't want to go through him. He doesn't know anything about the internet or anything. This is about a new idea. And she's like, you just can't do this. Nobody does this. And you always have to go on the opposite side of can't in order to succeed, because every new unique idea there's going to be an entire wall of people who say can't, that are in the way between you and success. And the more you validate, or the more you outsource validation to this wall of people, and by the way, it's quite a lot of people in your life, the more you outsource your validation to that wall of people, the less chances you have for success. So for instance, my parents also did not want me to start a business. My friends didn't want me to start a business. My friends didn't want me to write a book. They were afraid. Even now when I write a book, someone always says, oh, are you sure you really want to do that? It's going to probably take away time you have from other things. Nobody wants you to succeed past them. And that sounds kind of cynical and pessimistic, but it's not. I think it's just people are afraid. People are naturally afraid of the unknown. And entrepreneurs, almost by definition, are trying something that's unknown. Like at the time when I started a website development business, nobody had one. At the time I've started other businesses, nobody had these businesses. And so, you have to. Here's another example. Let's say you write a novel and you think it's pretty good, and you go to you submit it to 20 agents. They all say no. Okay, I don't need an agent. You sort it to 20 publishers. They all say no. Okay, well, now I have to write another book, or I guess I wasn't a good writer. Well, that's not true. You could submit it. You could just self-publish it on Amazon. And it's not the same as the old kind of self-publishing where you print up 500 copies from a vanity publisher and you put it in the back of your car and you go from bookstore to bookstore, which, by the way, was a very successful technique for Wayne Dyer in 1972 with a book called Your Erogenous Zones, where he sold 100 million copies ultimately. But self-publishing on Amazon is very respectable. Now, there are best-selling books. There are more bestsellers that are self-published than non-self-published right now on Amazon. But what I'm saying is there's always gatekeepers. And in book publishing, when you write a book, the agents, the publishers, the editors, the bookstores, they're your gatekeepers. But if I just self-publish on Amazon, I just got rid of all the gatekeepers. I didn't outsource my validation to them. Now, my book might be horrible, but I'll write another book. The more books you write, the better writer you will be. And there's a lot of books that are published by mainstream publishers that are awful, and really poorly written. And you only get better at writing by writing a lot and reading a lot. And it turns out a friend of mine did a study of books on Amazon, self-published versus mainstream published. The self-published ones as a group had a higher average star rating than the mainstream published ones were. So it could be the case that self-published books are even higher quality right now. So anyway, what I'm saying is with every industry or activity or thing you have to do, your first job, and maybe your always job, is to remove as many obstacles as possible. And this is related to removing risk, but removing the gatekeepers, removing obstacles, removing risk. This is how you choose yourself. And I'll give you another example. There's a guy, and you guys might know him, Scott Young. He wrote a book called Ultra Learning. He was a computer science major. He got a computer science, or he took the 4-year computer science program at MIT, but he did it only through their online courses. And I believe it took him about 9 months to finish the 4-year degree. Now, of course, he didn't get a degree because MIT is a gatekeeper and you have to pay $280,000 for 4 years, over a period of 4 years if you want to get the computer science degree. And so there was this whole discussion on Reddit once. Would you hire him even though he doesn't have the actual certificate? And finally, an employer went on there and said, of course I would hire him. He took the initiative and he got a degree that all these suckers are taking 4 years to get. He got it in 8 months or 9 months. And so he removed the gatekeepers to his education. Learning has nothing to do with a certificate, which we're actually realizing more and more now in today's day and age. So no matter what is your goal or dream, choosing yourself to achieve it rather than listening to all the people who say no to you is a way to succeed. Now, it might be the case you lose interest in the goal. That's fine. Then you could choose yourself for something else. But you might, I'll give you another example. Mike Massimino, he is the astronaut who fixed in outer space. He fixed the Hubble Space Telescope. Remember when the Hubble telescope was broken and they sent up a space shuttle to fix it? Well, he was the guy who fixed it. He applied to be in NASA, I think it was 5 times, and they said no every single time. So after the second or third time, he actually went to MIT. He got a PhD in robotics, specifically how to manage remotely a robot walking around on Mars. So a convenient degree. And then he applied for NASA again. They said no. He moved to Houston, where all the astronauts lived. He moved to the exact little suburban area where all the astronauts lived. He coached the soccer team of all these astronauts' kids. He applied again, and they said no. And it turned out it's because his eyesight was just a little bit off. You needed to have perfect 20/20 vision to be an astronaut, and he was like 20/40 or whatever the equivalent is. And so for a year, he read about and he practiced these exercises so that for very short periods of time, he would have 20/20 vision. And after a year of doing these exercises for hours a day, he applied to NASA again, and he did the exercise right before, so he knew he had a 2-hour block where he would have perfect vision, and he got into NASA. And by the way, NASA no longer has that vision requirement anymore. And at NASA, he fixed all the images you see now about outer space come from the Hubble Space Telescope. He's the guy who fixed it.
He must have done the exercise right before he went out to fix it.
Yeah.
In terms of
well, then he probably wore glasses then.
in terms of not outsourcing your validation, I think that's a really great idea. But what do you do on those times, when you don't outsource your validation and you're relying on it to come from within? What do you do during the times where you're down on yourself and you're not validating yourself? How do you get through those patches?
That's such an important question too, because so many people will say, "Oh, tell me a good idea," or "What do you think of my idea to start a business?" Or "What do you think of XYZ stock? Should I invest in stocks now?" And these are all the wrong question. Like, let's say I even knew what the best stock in the world is, and let's say I told you and you put money in it, and you put money in it at the exact right moment to put money in it, where it was almost like a guarantee you would make money. I will still bet it's at least 50-50 that you're going to lose money on it. Because as Naresh was mentioning earlier, the psychology of entrepreneurship or investing or really any kind of success is really brutal. And it doesn't come from having a single good idea. It doesn't come from persistence. You have to, and this is where it's almost like a little cliche, but this is really true. I failed so many times that I finally took a look back and said, what am I doing right on the way up? And what am I doing wrong somehow every time on the way down? And the answer turned out to be somewhat simple. Every day, I call this the daily practice. It's a daily practice I do. I write about it in almost all my books now. And it's basically very simple. Every day, can I try to improve 1% at my physical health, emotional health, creative health, spiritual health? So physical just means eat, move, sleep. You got to sleep 8 hours or you're going to be too tired to come up with ideas and too tired to execute. Emotional health really just means, am I around people who I love and not toxic people? Like if you're arguing with your spouse or partner or kids all day long, you're not going to come up with good ideas. Creative health, very important. People's idea muscles, creativity is a muscle. And just like any muscle, it atrophies without use. And 99.999% of people really don't use their creativity muscle that much. So what I do is I have a waiter's pads and I write down 10 ideas a day. And I do it every single day. I've done it every single day for as long as I can remember. I've done it every single day most of the time since 2002. But when I sold companies, I would stop. I would think, I don't need any more ideas. I'm done. And then I would lose everything because creativity is important for functioning in just an everyday life. And people say to me, well, how could you write 10 good ideas a day? And I say, I don't. I write 10 bad ideas a day. And
Can you share a couple of them that you've done in the last couple of days with us?
Yeah. I mean, yesterday I was thinking of how can America afford, and I was just playing around. Again, I wasn't trying to come up with good ideas. I was just playing around. And I was thinking, I wanted to challenge myself. I was like, how can America directly afford to pay for a $2,000 a month UBI for the next 6 months for all 100 million people in the workforce? And the idea is, I was just trying to think out loud if this is a potential solution, because the stimulus package that passed in March didn't really go into the economy. It went mostly to bail out big industries, which may or may not be a good thing, but it's not going to replace dollar for dollar the money that was not spent this quarter. So the stimulus package didn't achieve, or it's I will say this as a prediction, it won't achieve the goal they thought it was going to achieve. And so I was thinking, how about if they do a stimulus package which directly goes to the worker, Americans don't save money. The average American has $400 in savings, or did. The average American now has $0 in savings. So I was trying to figure out what are ways that America could make enough money to do another $2 trillion stimulus, but pay for itself instantly without necessarily borrowing the money, and then give a $2,000 UBI for 5 months to 100 million people, which equals $2 trillion. And so there would be some simple ideas like you could sell the post office, but even that was not so simple. I had to do a little bit of research. The post office loses money, but that's because there was a law passed in 2006 where the post office has to pre-fund for the next 75 years all of its Social Security and Medicare responsibilities. They have to project what their employees will need in Social Security 75 years from now, and they have to fund that every year. So, and then I had to look at the P&L, the balance sheet of the post office. So the post office lost something like $4 billion last year, but $7 billion of it was this payment that they shouldn't have to do. They're the only government agency that has to do it. So then I do some back of the envelope math and figured, okay, it's not unreasonable for Federal Express or Amazon to buy the post office for $120 billion if you subtract out this payment. And now I just raised $120 billion. And, so I had 10 ideas like that. And another one was the GSA, the General Service Administration. They collect rent. They're a government agency, but they collect the rent on all government buildings. So the State Department pays rent on the State Department's building, and they pay it to the GSA. And so I was thinking they could monetize the way banks monetize mortgages. The GSA could monetize those payments by turning them into bonds, call them GSA bonds, sell them to foreign countries at 5% interest or even 2% interest, make them 100-year bonds because I think there would be the interest from foreign countries, and monetize their payments, again, raising probably around $200 billion, selling the next 30 years or selling the next 100 years of payments in advance. And then all the GSA would have to do is pay the interest on those bonds. And so anyway, those were 2 of the 10 ideas for raising $2 trillion really quickly, just in case you ever need to do that.
All right, we're going to stop it right there for now. We will be back next episode with more from James Altucher. You can find him online at jamesaltucher.com. That's James Altucher, ALTUCHER.com, or at chooseyourselffinancial.com. That's chooseyourselffinancial.com. Thanks to all of you for listening to the show. Check us out, workfromhomeshow.com. That's workfromhomeshow.com. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to tell us, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. And until next time, keep on working from home.